Marvel has announced that Jean Grey, the original pre or post Phoenix, we don't know, is coming back.
Last killed off by Grant Morrison, I believe. But it's so hard to keep up with the comics these days.
Actually, no, I believe that sounds about right, because she hasn't come back since that last time. So
right, except that she has.
Well,
and then there was like 1,000 Phoenixes running around, and we'll get into the repetitiveness of this in a minute. But yeah, so Jean Grey is returning as the character Phoenix. That is pretty much all she's known for. Other than calling her boyfriend in the cartoon series in the 90s Cyclops, even though he did have an actual first name. It's just like every romantic scene between Jean Grey, whose superhero name is Jean Grey, and Cyclops, aka Scott Summers. It's like, oh, Cyclops, shut up. Like, oh man, like the cartoons have not necessarily gotten a lot better, but there was definitely better examples, and a lot of us have a love of that 90s X-Men cartoon series because it was very good at adapting from the comics, but at the same time it was just so cheesy. It was in some ways it was just so bad. It's like watching 90s and 80s superhero movies and that was all we had, and now having to compare them to things from the last 10, 15 years, they don't hold up. And why would they? But how many old movies hold up? It's touch and go on some of that stuff, but they really don't hold up. But when we were kids, man, they were awesome. And some things it's like, okay, so we've got a modern day Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles couple of films, but they don't seem to hold up compared to the original ones. And the original ones were hokey and kind of like puppety costumes and everything, but they just felt a lot more purely close to what the comics were, and the new ones are all just like over stylized. So it can go both ways.
Yeah. So Marvel has announced they're doing a limited series called the Resurrection of Jean Grey, which again I think, as we said, she hasn't really been back fully. Like there've been like these other little like instances. I would compare it almost to, from what I understand, of Barry Allen when he died during Crisis on Infinite Earths, where he came back in these little bits, but it wasn't like, he's back, here's his new regular series. No, it was just bring him in.
Well, I was speaking more of the young versions of the original 5 X-Men being around, and somehow that's still, while never making sense, just doesn't seem to matter anymore. You've got the young versions of some of these characters coexisting with the current day versions, and current day Iceman suddenly discovering that he must be gay because the young version of him is, and the only reason the young version that he decided that he was is because young Jean Grey said, Bobby, you're gay. Really? I didn't know that. Well, I guess that must be true. And it was just like, we'll get into who did that in a few minutes too, but it was a poorly written scene to make what is probably some very interesting comics as the results.
Yeah.
But that moment didn't feel earned and felt really kind of cruel. And you've been outed to yourself by a friend who read your mind and invaded your privacy. That said, this is old school Jean Grey to fix the issues that we have with older school Jean Grey.
So, okay, to make this easier on you, when we say this, we are talking about the adult Jean Grey, not teenage Jean Grey, who is the time displaced one.
No, because nerd culture has leaked into porn, and adult Jean Grey sounds like something else entirely. I don't.
Okay, in her 30s, Jean Grey.
We'll just call her Jean Grey Prime. That for some reason that rings to me, even though we don't know that that's necessarily the case, because Jean Grey was supposed to be Phoenix, and then when Jean Grey came back to life after the whole Dark Phoenix thing, it turned out she wasn't ever really Phoenix. It was some clone or something. And then Madeline Pryor, and oh man, so many Jean Greys. It's almost as many Wolverines. It's just so bad.
But anyways, we are so off track of this story here, because they've announced the writing and art team for this, and then they've announced the roster for X-Men Red. This is the series that is going to take place. That is this Jean Grey. There's going to be taking place in the Resurrection of Jean Grey, that she is going to be leading. So they're going to have 3 X-Men color books. I think we're 3 away from just having X-Men Rainbow.
I'm going to go into that in a second too.
Yeah.
But yeah.
but so far, and Corey, you can give us backstory on some of these characters, because I'm familiar with a few of them. Well, actually, most of them. But
All right, so the creative team is Tom Taylor, who is currently writing All New Wolverine, and I think might be writing the Resurrection of Jean Grey for Marvel. I'm not 100% on that, but so he's going to be introducing this new team and new book. Mahmoud Asrar is the artist, and then Travis Charest is going to be doing the covers. Travis did a really, to me, just fantastic run of Wildcats in the 90s with Alan Moore writing. Always liked his work, but he is not super fast, so it makes sense that he's a cover artist on this.
Yeah. So some of the team, they've announced the team. They were teasing it. It was weird because in my Feedly thing today, because I didn't have to go into work until 4. So when I checked it at 10, they had the, hey, Marvel's teased this, and then like an hour later, here's the team. I'm like, but usually when you tease something, you're doing it over a couple days, not.
Yeah, they did they did the classic thing where they show the cover and they have the first person on the team, Jean, in the middle, show her, and everybody else is blacked out, and then slowly they reveal the other characters throughout the day. But they did them in groups of 2, so they really didn't want to stretch it out too long, and some of them were kind of obvious. You could tell from the outlines of the claws of X-23/Wolverine/Laura and the hand of Nightcrawler, although again multiple Nightcrawlers jumping around, so see which one this is. You could tell who some of these characters were. There was some question based off of the hairstyle and the pointed ears of whether it was Namor or Northstar.
Yeah.
So it turns out to be so there we've got it up.
Real quick, because I got from my comic book store the Marvel Value Stamped book that they've been doing with all of the Marvel Legacy issues. But inside they have advertised nice and big the Phoenix Resurrection story, and actually it is written by Matthew Rosenberg with art by Lennon Yu, Carlos Pacheco, Joe Bennett, Ramon Rosanas, and Elizabeth Torque.
Okay, well, I recognize more the artist than I do. Yeah. I don't recognize the writer, unfortunately.
Gosh, he did something recently, but I can't think of it right now. But anyways, let's get on here the team, because I actually like this team. This is really cool. The Wakandan mutant, which I didn't know he was Wakandan, Jensel. He is in the upper left corner. When you look at this, his with the power to increase his muscle mass for short periods of time.
Yeah, he's interesting because he was introduced when Storm was married to Black Panther, and she transferred him over to the Xavier School because his powers are uncontrollable. As he uses his powers more and more, he gets stronger, but it will sort of take over his body, and eventually he won't be able to contain his own strength. So he's covered with tattoos that are made from vibranium to kind of help keep him in place, but he's a danger to himself. It's not dissimilar from Hulk in that hulking out makes Hulk dangerous to himself and others, but in this it's more he uses his powers and he's more likely to die young. And so that I guess kind of works with what the name is of Gentle, because you don't really want to overdo stuff. I guess he also doesn't feel anything. He has no sense of touch at this point because of his powers. He's supposed to be at a power level of Colossus, or potential power level of a Colossus, which is a class 100 in the Marvel Universe measurements. And that's the other thing, is you're going to look at this and you're going to see parallels to other X-Men teams and other X-Men characters and how they play off it. So I'm interested to see what his character is like personality wise to play off of what his power set is. Yeah.
The next one, actually, I'm going to do the next 2 because they're both someone that or characters that Tom Taylor is very familiar with, because he is writing their book. The young Wolverine clone Gabby, who is in the middle left, she has a single bone claw in each hand, an insensitivity to pain, and a healing factor. This was when the start of the all-new Wolverine book. She was one of 3 girls who were clones of Laura Kinney, a clone, who is the other one we're going to talk about here, is the all-new Wolverine, with the same powers as Wolverine. The difference being she has 2 claws in her hands and then 1 claw in her foot.
Yeah, Laura Kinney, if you aren't familiar with the comics, if you saw the Logan movie, she was what the character was that Logan was protecting in that film, just in a more adult version. And she's only ever really been an adult version in the comics since she was introduced by Chris Yost, and I never remember the other guy's name. I feel so bad. Craig Kyle in the X-Men cartoon series that they had years ago. They introduced X-23 on that, and then they brought her over to the comics. And then Joe Quesada was using her in NYX, which was New York X-Men, which was kind of like a out of continuity thing that they moved into continuity. And she replaced Wolverine eventually in the role when Logan died. So right off the bat, we've got a clone of Wolverine and then a clone of Wolverine. I have stuff to say about this. We'll get to it. But interesting because Gabby is young and pretty innocent and not as corrupted as I guess her sisters were. And so to see her on the team and gentle on the team, it seems like it's not a team that's meant for slugfests or it's going to lead to some emotional turmoil if it results in that, because these are characters that, while they're very capable of getting into blowout fights, probably shouldn't, either due to their ages or their physical ailments and stuff.
So Gabby, who she doesn't have a name yet, but she's a code name. She started out, she was the one mutant, the one out of her sisters, out of her two other sisters that didn't have a healing factor, or have, so they were all really careful. Actually, no, none of them had a healing factor, but she couldn't feel. She can't feel any pain and all that. And Growly's asking, isn't Gabby one of the X-23 clones or the 23 other clones? No, so it's separate because X-23 was like the 23rd trial of the cloning process of Wolverine. Actually, wait, I think that's wrong. Anyways, no, she's Gabby was taken out afterwards and made a separate cloning process from Laura as opposed to from Wolverine.
You got to think duplicity, Growly. It's more of a, if you've ever seen, oh man, I'm really dating myself, the Michael Keaton movie where he made a bunch of clones and then some of them didn't bake all the way and just got worse and worse. It's more like that. As at some point you reach the clone nexus of you're just creating more goo.
So the next team member that we're going to talk about is the team leader, Jean Grey, returned to life under as of yet unexplained circumstances. Whereabouts of the Phoenix Force currently unknown. We will find out in Phoenix Resurrection.
Thank you, Growly. You're right. Multiplicity.
Yeah. Namor, the Submariner, in the upper right corner of the cover with the power of flight and super strength, and also being a massive dick.
Yeah, assholery is Namor's biggest power set. And man, they have really pushed to make Namor a part of the X-Men for a long time, because they a few years ago they said, oh yeah, he's the first mutant and everything. It's like, okay, but we've never really made any kind of ties to him being relation to the real mutants like the X-Men mutants, but they just harder and harder as much as they can. And I guess it makes a certain degree of sense because they can't use him in Fantastic Four, which is where he was introduced as both a foil and a friend, and sometimes a fuck buddy for Sue Storm. And we can't use him in Avengers because, man, the Avengers fucking hate him. Fucking hate him. And they're right.
Well, to be fair though, I don't think there's a lot of X-Men that like him either.
No, but I mean, the Avengers actively, like, I do believe Black Panther tried to kill him. Mm-hmm. And everybody who read the book was like, fucking kill this guy.
No, wait, no, okay. He was going to, but had mercy on him and hid him from Wakanda, who wanted to kill him because he flooded Wakanda.
Right, but I thought he actually stabbed him with a vibranium blade or something. And you just look on his face. Like I said, I haven't read comics in a while.
Yeah. But
the stuff that I pick up on is like, okay, that looked like a cool moment. Well, that looked like an earned moment.
Okay, I'll put it to you this way. The last time you really saw the Submariner, he was teaming, in air quotes, with Thanos and Thanos's minions going
Right.
to other Earths to destroy them, to prevent the Earth. Basically, this is before Battle World and Secret Wars 2. Secret Wars
Well,
2.
he was also part of the Squadron Supreme book, where they both killed him at the beginning of the series and then they brought him back to life at the end of the series
Yeah.
because it's Marvel.
Yeah. The other one, like Corey mentioned before, is Nightcrawler. He's in the middle right, with the power of teleportation.
Nightcrawler, one of the greatest X-Men of all time.
Yeah, and I believe Nightcrawler's on X-Men Gold.
Right. And so expect some shifting in those other teams.
Yeah.
At some point.
And then a brand new character whose origins and powers have not yet been revealed, Trinary. She's in the lower left-hand corner.
Yeah. Don't know anything about her. She looks a little bit like M from Generation X. The name Trinary reminds me of Binary, which was an old Carol Danvers identity that was created when she was hanging out with the X-Men after she had her powers and memories stolen by Rogue. And she went with the X-Men into space and fought the Brood with the Shi'ar and gained powers in there. And that's when she became Binary for a number of years. I don't know that there's any ties at all to that, but it's immediately what I think of when I look at the name.
Yeah.
Somebody else mentioned Triathlon, who was a Avenger, I think, in the Kurt Busiek run, if I remember correctly on that. So this is our team, and not knowing Trinary's powers, we've got our teleporter, who is very agile and that kind of keep you off your toes thing. We've got two Wolverine characters, one of them who is much more Wolverine in attitude than the other. We've got a strong, tough, kind of not exactly armored, but invincible sort of dude in Gentle, who should not utilize his powers. And we've got Super Dick in Namor, who I'm sure we won't have to worry about him spending a lot of time like, oh, I got to get near water, because it's a silly thing to have to try to concentrate on, especially in a team series. But he'll mostly just be like, who do I want to bang on this team? Because I'm Namor, and I want to show you my fish stick. It can be an interesting dynamic. It's hard to look at the team without knowing the background as to why they create this new team and why it's X-Men Red, other than the fact that it's a redhead in charge. I really thought it was just going to be a group of all Jean Grey clones. I thought it was going to be Hope and Rachel Summers and Goblin Queen and Young Jean. I just like it seemed like, because we had the team of essentially of Wolverines in X-Force a few years ago, where they just got like every badass and put them on the team. Like, you got a blade? Yeah, show up over here. Yeah, we're just going to go kill things all day. Why not? But that brings me back to a personal history I have with the X-Men, but not the real X-Men. But in the 90s, when the cartoon series was coming out, and I think I've probably mentioned this on the show before, I met a good number of friends and got started in writing and stuff on the old Prodigy bulletin board service. And in particular, in the Paper RPGs forums, there was a group that built up around the premiere of the X-Men cartoon series. And it was a lot of people that were play acting as different X-Men characters. And of course, there were way too many people to just be characters from the show or even characters from the comics to a certain degree. So a lot of us made up our own characters. And again, because there were so many people, you couldn't just have, at that point in time in the comics, there was X-Men Gold and X-Men Blue, one book being written by Scott Lobdell, and the other book being written by Fabian Nicieza. So we had multicolor groups, and they didn't really have a theme for some of the teams. It was just like, this is X-Men White, and this is X-Men Blue, and this is X-Men Gold, and this is X-Men Green, and this is X-Men whatever. And when I joined up and I created my character, I wound up in X-Men Red, and X-Men Red did have a theme, which was more of, it was like the kind of more cutthroat version of the X-Men, not necessarily like the Black Ops team, because there was a X-Men Black, but it was a little bit more of, you were going to get more mature storylines. You were going to get more adult stuff. It was led by my friend Josh, who was a werewolf character, and my other best friend Anne and her werewolf character. And my character was a guy that was in silver armor and had swords and guns and everything. And then we also had silly stuff. Like we had a guy who hung out with us that was just, he turned into a dog. And he spent most of his time just as a dog. And since it was people playing online, it was just a lot of silly, fun stories. Like my character spent most of his time looking to see who stole his cream rinse because his poor hair couldn't handle not being conditioned well enough. And so the other day, Josh posted on my board and he's like, hey, here's this new X-Men Red team coming out. I said, needs a werewolf. And he was posting today as they were showing the characters. He's like, well, there's no werewolf here. I'm like, yeah, but there's 2 Wolverines. I feel like we kind of are meeting our quota. And I can see Gentle as being like maybe my version of my character in some similarities. And the super dick version of Namor, I created a character that was essentially like my first asshole character, and everybody who saw me playing the one character who was nice and very knightly and honorific and everything, it was funny, and people thought, oh yeah, Corey's great at writing humor. Then I start writing this other character, and this guy is just pure 100% asshole the entire time. I'm like, who's writing this guy? and so I'm looking at this and I'm seeing the parallels between our X-Men Red and this X-Men Red. Oh, and I should mention, later on, as I got voted up to being one of the kind of leads of the whole group, I reassigned all the X-Men teams and gave them reasons for being. So X-Men Red kind of continued being what it was, but X-Men Black became the Blackhawks team. The X-Men Silver became the Magic-based team. X-Men White, I think it was, because it already existed, became more of like the X Factor, became the public face. The doing, like, if you need somebody to go and show up on the news or be like out in front of cameras, that would be them, and so on and so forth. X-Men Green, I think, was our eco-terrorism team or whatever, dealing with challenges. It made sense at the time. Very 90s. Yeah. And before Jeff Johns ever did fucking shit with Green Lantern, it was already there. But it's just so funny to me to see this happening now, because one of the people that we used to talk to on the bulletin boards was Scott Lobdell. And that was before he was doing Generation X. Like, I remember Generation X was coming out. I'm like, hey, Scott, let me tell you about some character ideas that you should throw in Generation X. And Scott, to his credit, didn't listen to me at all. I fucking landed everything himself, did a great book, did one of my favorite comics of all time.
Yeah. No, that's awesome.
For more on this Galactic Network podcast, go to gncast.com. That's GNCASTS.com.